I've always been fascinated by the weird corners of the internet, especially the dark web. One night, bored and alone, I decided to dive in. After browsing through various forums and marketplaces, I stumbled upon a link titled Curious Games. It looked like an old-school, text-based adventure game, but with a twist. The description was vague, but intriguing. Press the riddle button and choose your fate. The first riddle was innocent enough. Would you rather have the power of flight, but never touch the ground again? Or have super strength, but lose the ability to feel? I chose flight, and the screen flashed. Good choice. Imagine the freedom, but beware the loneliness of the sky. It felt eerie but harmless. As I continued, the choices became darker. One riddle asked, would you rather see everyone's secrets but lose the ability to communicate, or read minds, but go mad from the noise? The tension in my chest tightened, but my curiosity was stronger. I chose the latter, and the screen responded, a brave soul, beware, for knowledge is a double-edged sword. Then, things started getting weird. The game began to ask more personal questions, ones that seemed to know intimate details about my life. Would you rather live in your happiest memory forever, but lose your sense of reality, or forget your happiest moments to escape your darkest fears? It felt like the game was prying into my mind, pulling out things I hadn't thought about in years. I hesitated but pressed on, driven by an inexplicable need to see where this was going. The final riddle appeared. Would you rather have the power to see the truth in all things but lose your sight, or know when someone is lying but lose your voice? Before I could choose, another message popped up. Last question, would you rather stay inside or go out to meet the stranger waiting at your door? Chills ran down my spine. I hadn't mentioned my address or even my location anywhere on the internet. My apartment was dead silent, and I realized I was holding my breath. The screen flashed again, this time showing a grainy, live feed of my front door. Someone was standing there, face obscured by a hoodie. I jumped up, heart pounding. This couldn't be real. Maybe it was a prank, some sick joke by the game's creator. But as I stared at the screen, the figure raised a hand and knocked. The sound echoed through my apartment, confirming my worst fear. This was happening. I frantically shut down my computer, my hands shaking. The knocking continued, persistent and deliberate. I backed away from the door, grabbing my phone to call the police, but my fingers felt numb and clumsy. The knocking stopped, replaced by silence. I waited, too terrified to move. Minutes felt like hours, and then I heard footsteps retreating. I waited a while longer before cautiously peering through the peephole. The hallway was empty, but a note was taped to my door. I ripped it off, my heart racing as I unfolded it. The note simply read, "Curiosity killed the cat." I never found out who was at my door that night, or how they found me. I moved the next day, deleting every trace of my online presence. But sometimes, in the dead of night, I wonder what would have happened if I had opened that door. The dark web has a way of pulling you in deeper than you ever intended, and some doors are better left unopened. I've always been a curious guy, even before I joined the Marines. So when I overheard some locals in Afghanistan talking about the dark web during one of our patrols, my interest was piqued. They mentioned deals and markets, stuff that sounded straight out of a movie. A few of the other guys laughed it off, but I couldn't shake the itch to check it out. A few nights later, I found myself alone in the barracks, everyone else either asleep or out on the base. I figured it was as good a time as any to explore. I set up my laptop, made sure my VPN was running, and dove into the dark web. I clicked through various links, mostly mundane or bizarre stuff. Nothing really shocking. Then I stumbled upon a chat room. It looked like any other, but the usernames were odd, and the messages were concerning. They were discussing trade deals involving illegal goods, drugs, weapons, even human trafficking. The amounts of money they mentioned were staggering, millions of dollars changing hands like it was nothing. My stomach churned, but I couldn't look away. I knew I shouldn't be there, but I was glued to the screen, reading message after message. Suddenly, one of the users posted, "Who's the new guy?" The question was followed by a flurry of similar messages, all asking about the stranger in the chat. My heart rate spiked. I hadn't said anything, hadn't interacted at all, but somehow they knew I was there. Panic set in. I shut the laptop and yanked out the power cord, heart pounding in my chest. I sat there in the dark, listening to the sounds of the bass, trying to convince myself it was just a coincidence. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just made a huge mistake. Over the next few days, I tried to put it out of my mind, but something felt off. Whenever I went downtown, I noticed people watching me. At first, I thought I was being paranoid, but it kept happening. I'd catch a shopkeeper's eyes lingering on me a bit too long, or a group of men would stop talking and stare as I walked by. It was subtle, but the feeling was unmistakable. I was being observed. I told myself it was just in my head, that they were curious about the foreign soldier wandering through their streets, but the unease grew. I'd scan the crowd, looking for familiar faces or signs that I was being followed, but there was nothing concrete, just that nagging sense of being watched. One evening, while grabbing supplies, I noticed a man across the street, leaning against a wall, staring directly at me. He didn't look away when I caught his gaze. My blood ran cold. I hurried back to the base, avoiding eye contact, every shadow seeming to harbor a threat. Back at the barracks, I locked the door and sat down, trying to calm my racing thoughts. I hadn't used my laptop since that night, and I wasn't planning to. I knew I needed to stay under the radar, keep a low profile, and hope this all blew over. Days passed, and gradually, the strange looks and the feeling of being watched faded. I never saw the man again, and the locals seemed to go back to treating me like just another soldier. I kept my head down, did my job, and avoided any unnecessary trips downtown. I never talked about what happened, not even to my buddies. Looking back, I'm not sure what scared me more. The fact that I'd stumbled onto something dangerous, or that brief moment when I felt truly vulnerable in a place where danger was supposed to come from the battlefield, not the internet. I've learned my lesson. Some doors are better left unopened, and curiosity can lead you down paths you'd rather not walk. For now, I'm safe, but the experience lingers in the back of my mind, a reminder of how quickly things can spiral out of control. You think you're just scratching an itch, and the next thing you know, you're in over your head. Be careful what you look for. Sometimes it finds you. It was one of those nights where boredom pushed us to do something stupid. We were all at Mike's place, a typical sleepover with snacks, gaming, and that restless energy teenage boys get when the night stretches on too long. We'd played through every game we had, and someone, probably Jake, who always had the craziest ideas, suggested we check out the dark web. You can find game hacks there, even unreleased versions, he said, eyes gleaming. We all huddled around Mike's laptop as he navigated through the Tor browser, the screen casting an eerie glow in the dimly lit room. After some digging, we found a site that looked promising. It claimed to have an unreleased version of Call of Duty, boasting new maps, weapons, and an ultra-realistic mode. The description was vague, but the excitement was palpable. We couldn't believe our luck. Mike clicked the download link, and the game installed surprisingly fast. We booted it up, eager to dive into the new content. The title screen looked authentic, with familiar logos and music. But when we tried to navigate the menus, the controls seemed off. The options were limited, only allowing us to start a game. We shrugged it off, thinking maybe it was just a weird beta version. The game launched directly into a first-person perspective. The graphics were stunningly realistic, but something felt off. The heads-up display was missing, and there were no in-game instructions or objectives. The screen showed a desolate urban landscape, foggy and dark as if the city had been abandoned for years. We thought it was a new level design, something more immersive. As we watched, the screen jerked and moved in a disorienting way. It was like the player was looking around nervously, the view darting from side to side. "Whoever's playing sucks at this," Jake laughed. But then it hit us. There was no controller connected. Mike tapped the keys and moved the mouse, but nothing happened. The screen continued to show the player's POV moving independently. That's when we noticed the breathing. It was faint but unmistakable, a ragged, panicked sound. The player's hands, visible at the bottom of the screen, were trembling. The realization hit us all at once. This wasn't gameplay footage. It was live. Someone was out there wearing a GoPro, and we were seeing through their eyes. We tried to exit the game, but nothing worked. Alt plus F4, Task Manager, even a hard shutdown, the screen stayed on, locked into this horrific live feed. The player reached a wide-open plaza, hesitating before stepping out. Suddenly, a shadow darted across the screen, and the camera whipped around to reveal a masked figure, armed to the teeth, closing in fast. Panic erupted in the room. We screamed at the screen, shouting for the player to run, to hide, but they seemed paralyzed with fear. The masked figure raised a gun, and the feed cut out, replaced by a static-filled screen and a chilling message, "Game over." The laptop finally powered off, leaving us in stunned silence. We stared at each other, hearts pounding, trying to process what we'd just seen. It felt too real, too horrifying to be a game or a prank. None of us knew what to say, but the unspoken agreement was clear. We'd seen something we weren't supposed to. We never told anyone about that night. We deleted everything, scrubbed the laptop, and tried to forget, but the memory lingered. Sometimes, late at night, I think about that person, forced into a twisted, real-life battle royale. I wonder who they were, how they ended up there, and if they ever got out. But most of all, I wonder what other nightmares are lurking out there on the dark web, waiting for someone foolish enough to stumble upon them.